So there are three types of testing which you should all know. One, unit testing, another one, integration testing, and lastly, it is end-to-end testing. So what are these three? Unit testing can be considered as testing a smallest function in your application. I mean, literally, the smallest functionality that could happen possibly in your application. But before, I'm just saying smallest in the sense, not in the terms of feature, but in the terms of code wise. Like, are you mingling with 2 to 3 helper functions, or are you just having one single helper function? The most relevant answer would be to just invoke a function and check whether if that function is running or not. It's as simple as that. So let me give you an even more boiled down example. All right. We have a to-do list application and it accepts two inputs, obviously the title and the body. And then if we are clicking that to-do to be created, some functionality will happen inside the background, right? Firstly, you need to construct a to-do. Secondly, you need to add the to-do inside your to-dos array. And thirdly, you need to create a new DOM element and then inject it inside your application, correct? So these are the three parts that happen. Now the thing is, each of these functionalities can be referred as a unit test. That is what I was talking about. The smallest functionality you could ever think of is called as a unit test. Testing that particular functionality. All right, let me give you a theoretical example. When you're creating a to-do, I told you that we have to construct a to-do, right? What is meant by constructing a to-do? It returns an object with the properties that have been fed inside that function. Now, what if you forgot to pass that function? What if you forgot to pass arguments in that function? What if you have some obtrusive words like censorable words? What if you didn't even pass the value for that particular function, but the value has been passed in the parameter as an empty string? So these are all the edge cases that you could ever think of for a particular functionality. Makes sense? That is called as unit testing. Now, what in the world does integration testing mean? Well, the word itself suggests integration. Normally, what is the meaning in English for integration? Combining something or cumulating something, collection of something is called as integration, correct? So, if you have multiple functionalities inside your application and then you are batching them up as a single functionality. Well, one good example would be creating a to-do because it had three functionalities, right? Constructing a to-do, pushing it inside the programmatically created array of to-dos, and then injecting that to-do inside your DOM. Now, if you had to integrate this particular functionality, that is called as an integration test. You would be checking what could be the possibilities this could fail. Whether is this giving an error or is this giving undefined value, etc., etc. So if you are entirely testing a function which has some inner functionalities baked in, then that is called as an integration testing. So the unit testing can be considered as the smallest functionality in your application. The integration test can be considered as your medium-sized functionality. Now, the point of end-to-end testing is what I can consider is a cost heavy thing, because end-to-end testing is something you should not do a lot, because you need to have more engineers for your business. You need to calculate the business time as well, because if you're pushing a project to your client, you should also keep that in mind that deadlines exist. If you are focusing too much time on testing, then that might be a particular bad sign for your deadline. So I would always say to keep end-to-end end-to-end tests at the least priority. Now, what is end-to-end testing even mean? Well, end-to-end testing is just mimicking your event handlings by a bot. Let me give you an example. Let's say we have a browser, and just now I told, right, we have two things. We have an input box and we have a body input box. And once you click that create to do, a new to do is being added at the bottom, correct? Now, this is what our application is. Instead of us manually typing and checking all those possibilities, a bot will come inside and then it will do the needy. Did you understand what I said? A bot or the computer itself will open that page, will type the details, and then it will try to submit it. So that is called as end-to-end testing. You are completely testing everything by just going through that process in a programmatical manner. That is end-to-end testing. And that's the reason why I have told you to keep less amounts of tests for end-to-end, medium amount of tests for integration, and huge amount of tests for unit testing. Because if you could find the bug in the unit test itself, chances are very low to happen in end-to-end testing, unless and otherwise if you do not have any internet connection or something like that. Now, speaking of internet connection, I also want to talk about asynchronous code testing, because not all times that we would have just synchronous code, right? This is just a basic example of me showing you DOM injection, but not all times that happens. We also have asynchronous code in our code base that we need to fetch something from an API, get something, post something, etc. How could you test in that particular way? Well, let's talk about that in a later period of time. But for now, let's start dwelling inside these tests one by one. I'll tell you how to do it, and then let's proceed further. Okay. So is that theory okay-ish? Did I make sense in any of the factors or what? Okay, fine. So now I want to tell you how to proceed in this particular testing. Before going into testing, I want to tell you some jargons that's available in testing. Okay. You need to know those jargons. One, it is called as test runner, right? And the next one is called as a assertion library. And then lastly, you would call it as a headless browser. We'll talk about what headless browser is. So what is a test runner? By the name itself suggests it is a software or it is a piece of code that allows you to validate your tests. Okay. Test runner can always be having multiple competitors. Some of the most famous competitors are Mocha, right? Jasmine, Gist, and etc. Assertion libraries are something where you can have some sort of expectations for your test. Let me give you an example. Let's say you have a function of add, which adds two numbers. Now, if you are passing that function with two numbers of 1 and 2, and if your result is expecting, underline the word that, expecting the value of 3, then that is called as an assertion. You want to expect some value and check if that is the truthy case or not. So that is the meaning of assertion library. Some examples would be chai, and then enzyme, and Jest as well. Jest acts as a test runner as well as an assertion library. So by now you would have probably guessed we are going to go towards Jest because it tackles two things in one software. Headless browser allows us to literally download a version of Chrome and then perform all the steps what I have just said here in end-to-end testing. One good example and one good competitor as of now is Puppeteer. But there are also countless competitors. I can classify 3 of them. Cypress.io is one good headless browser thingy, and Sign-on.js is also a good browser factor. But we are going to handle on Puppeteer. All right. So yeah, I had to mention these three things before going ahead so that you all have a basic understanding. All right, so without further ado, let's start. But I don't want to confuse you right away on how to install just blah, 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 blah. Let me just give you a basic functionality of a test. Right?